I'm Josh Larky. This is the Dominator. Welcome in, folks, to the Week 4 Start Sit Show. I've got 19 players for you. And then I've got that Underdog Fantasy Pick-4 Entry slip for the good people. Quarterback, I'm starting Anthony Richardson. Fantasy Pros consensus quarterback 11. There's not too many stats here, but I think the logic will help you understand. So I just think it's a wild overreaction to last week. And an overreaction to the first 3 games of the season for Richardson. The Steelers, who he faces, have a strong defense, I think. Let's look at their 3 matchups. They faced Kirk Cousins in his first game back from the Achilles injury. Then they faced Bo Nix. Then high ankle sprain, Justin Herbert. I wouldn't bench Richardson yet, just start him. It's a better matchup than last week when he faced Chicago. I think this is just the classic, he scored 5 fantasy points for me last week. I'm done with him kind of ranking. Quarterback 11, I would be starting him. I would also stream Geno Smith. Fantasy Pros consensus, quarterback 16. He's at the Lions. It's the second highest game total on the slate. Detroit has been really strong against the run. So I think Seattle's going to try to beat Detroit through the air in this one. And I don't think Seattle can stop Detroit's offense overall, especially on the ground. There's a potential shootout incoming. Geno Smith is in for some touchdown regression as well. He's at under 3% for the season. I think he probably ends the year around 4.5%, about 50% higher than where he's at currently. And he's already been a streamable quarterback without as many touchdowns. Fire him up against the Lions. And stream Caleb Williams. He's the quarterback 18 by consensus against the Rams. Chicago, they cannot run the ball. DeAndre Swift can't run the ball. Roschon Johnson, we're going to do this live, folks. Let me pull this up because I've seen so many people go like, did you see the Roschon Johnson game? This is what fans were excited for. Roschon Johnson had under 4 yards per carry last week, and people got excited. 8 carries for 30 yards. That was 3.8 yards per carry. That's what people were like, Roschon Johnson. I'm not pooping on Roschon in terms of, I think he's an interesting bench stash right now, but that's how poorly Chicago's running the ball. They were like, thank God we didn't get a yard per carry from DeAndre Swift. The Rams' pass defense isn't great. Keenan Allen likely returns for this matchup. And Caleb Williams finally started to put it all together in week 3. 363 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Caleb Williams, welcome to the fantasy lineup. Running back. I'm starting Zack Moss, consensus running back 18 at Carolina. 3rd highest team total of the week for the Bengals. We like touchdowns. He had 12 carries for 58 yards and a score against the Commanders. Plus, he caught 5 of his 6 targets for another 39 yards. I don't think we need to worry about game script at this point, even though I think they will beat the Panthers. He's just a workhorse back. I think the Bengals will win handily. It's the Andy Dalton revenge game. I think that makes it more fun. I still think the Bengals win. And I think Zack Moss could flirt with 20 carries here. Let's flip sides. Other side of this game, it's Chuba Hubbard, the consensus running back 19. Last week, he had 21 carries for 114 yards on the ground against the Raiders. And he caught all 5 targets for 55 yards and a score. The Bengals are a defense to target. It's just a bottom 5 unit overall. I mean, we saw Jaden Daniels complete 91% of his passes this past week against the Bengals. The Bengals defense is really bad. And I think Jonathan Brooks, the exciting rookie, they traded up for in round 2. I think he could return in week 5. So Chuba could just get really heavy run and what looks like it might be his final game as the true locked-in starter for the Panthers. I'm also starting, that's gross, but Najee Harris, running back 23 by consensus at the Colts. The Steelers are favored to win this one. Jaylen Warren seems like he could miss week 4, whereas Harris seems good to go. Harris has at least 18 touches, at least 17 carries in every game this year. The Colts defense couldn't stop the run in week 1 or week 2 before they were just gifted with the Bears rushing attacks I mentioned earlier in week 3. So this Colts defense is bad against the run. I think the Steelers are just going to run it down their throat. in week 4. It looks like it's Justin Fields once again. Should be a very, very run-heavy game plan for the Steelers. And then, folks, we're recording this at 7. It's 7:59 a.m. Central Time, Thursday morning. So we're going to go with a bold prediction for tonight. Rico Dowdle, running back 30 at the Giants. We're going to start him. This is for the live audience only. They play tonight on Thursday. So Rico Dowdle had almost all the touches in this backfield last week. I was at that Cowboys game now that I live in Dallas. I was at the game. He was very explosive. God, that game. Oh, Cowboys did not look good for pretty much the entire game. Anyone that just sees the box score and go, oh, it was 28-25. Yeah, it was. They lost 28-25 to the Ravens, but they were down 3 scores for like the first 3 quarters of that game. It was out of hand. It was not a running back game script, so he didn't have that many pure touches, but he had almost all the running back work, and that's really important. Ezekiel Elliott did almost nothing for them. He only had a couple carries. Deuce Vaughn keeps getting his customary 2 carries up the middle, which makes absolutely no sense why they get him involved, especially up the middle when he's like 160 pounds. Anyway, I digress. The Cowboys have the 3rd highest team total of week 4. The spread is nearly 6 points in their favor. It's a good game script for Dowdle, who's getting almost all the work right now. I think he gets 15 touches in a good offense against the Giants tonight. And we'll very soon find out how this take ages. We got a question in the chat, Dionte or Higgins this week. I'd go Dionte. Let's talk about that a little more in just a second. Welcome in, chat. Good morning to everyone. I've got my coffee right here as well for the chat. It's so I usually go with the Tyrannosaurus Rex custom mug, where it's a little bit artsy. This is a Stegosaurus. I like dinosaurs. I like fantasy football. And here's the segue. I like Brandon Aiyuk, wide receiver 11, versus the Patriots. So the consensus knows he's going to do well. The consensus rankers, that is, the rankers apparently at Fantasy Pros, they know he's going to do well. I think the general public doesn't want to start Brandon Aiyuk. Let's discuss. So I know Juwan Jennings popped off for 46.5 fantasy points last week, but Brandon Aiyuk still had 10 targets. He caught just 5 of them for 48 yards. Deebo Samuel still unlikely to play. Brandon Ayuk's coming off of the most efficient wide receiver season ever by yards per target. And he barely practiced this offseason because of the contract dispute. The target should be there for him again. I would just not sit Brandon Aiyuk this week, despite him failing to reach 10 fantasy points in each of the first 3 games. We might talk about the Niners more in just a little bit. Tank Dell, consensus wide receiver 29 versus the Jaguars. He was banged up in week 3. We're going to monitor his practice status today, Thursday, and tomorrow, Friday. I think he's going to play from what the beat reporters are saying. He's running the same amount of routes as Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs. We know Tank Dell is a target earner from what he did as a rookie. The Jaguars are coming off a short week. They were lit up by Josh Allen on Monday night for 263 yards and 4 touchdowns. Tank Dell himself is starting to come on to his own. He caught 5 of 6 passes for 62 yards last week. 62 yards. That's only 2 fewer yards than Marvinson Harrison. Wow. Should I just call him Marvinson Harris? That'd be funny. He had 2 fewer yards than Marvin Harrison Jr. in week 3. Dell just didn't happen to catch a touchdown. Everyone was shitting themselves over how excited they were about Marvin Harrison Jr. last week. Guys, if Tank Dell caught the touchdown, we'd feel basically the same way. Obviously, I prefer Marvin Harrison Jr. It's not that I don't. It's more just perception can swing so wildly if the guy scores and just gets in the box. And ultimately, Tank Dell had a fine week 3. I think he's going to have a better week 4 against the Jaguars on a short week. That team is just demoralized. All right, we're getting to the question from the chat. Dionte Johnson. He's the consensus wide receiver 17 against the Bengals. I am starting him with confidence. Last week against the Raiders, his first game with Andy Dalton this year, 14 targets. He catches 8 for 122 yards and a touchdown. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the Bengals just allowed Jaden Daniels to complete 21 of 23 passes, 91%. Andy Dalton's going to have another solid day through the air. And Adam Thielen is now on injured reserve with a hamstring injury. So the targets are more consolidated. We know the Bengals can score. We know the Bengals can't stop other teams. It's a perfect storm. But you already knew that. You already knew Dionte Johnson. Throw him in the lineup, or at least consider starting him. But I am also starting. We're going to dive deep So last week, my sneaky start in the wide receiver 60 range was Michael Wilson of the Cardinals. We targeted that slot matchup against the Lions. If you want, you can target. We kept the show sheet a little slim, but we'll sneak one in. Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I've been making fun of the guy for a lot of this year, but I'm starting him this week. It's the Lions. We just keep targeting slot receivers against the Lions. We knew that Michael Wilson was going to get some kind of slot reps last week, as he did against the Lions, and sure enough, guy popped off 8 catches for 64 yards. This week, the sneaky start, Xavier Legette. Will we go 2 for 2 with these deep dumpster dive receivers? Xavier Legette, consensus, wide receiver 62 against the Bengals. So he went 2 catches, 42 yards last week. We know he's got this insane size speed combo for the receiver position. We know they traded up into the first round to get him. He's actually my second flex in a PPR league this week, where I've been hit with some injuries at the receiver position. I am literally a man of my word. I have Xavier Legette playing this week in one of my teams right now. And I think you should too, in those mid to deeper formats. Tight end. Mike Gesicki is the tight end 11 at the Carolina Panthers. The Bengals have the 3rd best team total. We know that tight end's touchdown dependent, so we like that. We like the team total. Gesicki's got at least 4 targets in every game. The last 2 games, 7 catches, 91 yards, 4 catches, 47 yards at the tight end position. That is gold this year. He's currently at an elite 2.8 yards per route run. That's insane. The league leader each year is usually at the receiver position around 3. Gesicki's not going to keep this up, but he's at 2.8. It's insane. So everyone right now calling for more Eric All playing time when he's under 2 yards per run, we just need to remember that Mike Gesicki's been better. He's been incredibly efficient. He's the veteran. There's always veteran deference. I just don't know what's going on there with the Eric All stands. Sure, he's an unknown athletic testing day 3 tight end pick who's currently playing less than the starter. When has that ever gone wrong for us? He might be something, but the people out there that are ship off a 2nd round pick for Eric All in Dynasty. No. Hold your breath. And let's think about DFS for just a second. And then I'll hit you with the start I hit you with the starts, I'll hit you with the sits, and I'll hit you with that Underdog Pick-4 entry.
DFS getting harder every year, but we're here to make it easier with the DFS Dominator, because I know a lot of optimizers keep coming out. Oh, our optimizer. What about this optimizer? But that optimizer. Well, we have a cash game optimizer that leverages the projections from Dario, Billy, the award-winning projections at PlayerProfiler.com, and builds the best lineups for cash games that have both upside and stability, because that's what you want. It's a couple clicks, boom, boom, boom. You get the best possible lineup for your cash games. But for tournaments, traditional optimizers don't work. That's why we have a Lineup Genius, which takes you through the process of building lineups the way they should be built. Which quarterbacks you want to be overweight on, then building stacks, then setting run backs, then optimizing, and generating up to 150 lineups that you can easily import into DraftKings, into FanDuel. That's the DFS Dominator. It's only $45 a year, not a week, a year. Just go to Player Profiler, click on the DFS Dominator from the menu, and you won't be sorry.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Josh Larky. This is the Dominator. We got questions in the chat. Are we worried about Christian Gonzalez shadowing Aiyuk? I mean, we don't love that, but the way the Niners have their offense, the way they use motion, I'm not particularly worried. I think Gonzalez is going to, sure, he'll cover him for a lot of snaps, but he's also not going to cover him for every route. Michael Wilson or Rico Dowdle in the chat. I'd go Dowdle tonight. Caleb or Anthony Richardson. Oof. I think I'd still lean Richardson, but as crazy as it sounds, I think that assuming Keenan Allen plays, I think Caleb's going to have a higher floor if that's what you need. Sleeper tight end recommendations for Trey McBride replacement. Ertz. Yes, I was actually going to say Zach Ertz. Perfect. All right. Let's talk about some sits, and then we'll hit you with that Underdog Pick-4 entry. Quarterback. So I talked about this game a little earlier. I'm sitting Jared Goff, the consensus quarterback 12 versus the Seahawks. I know, Josh, you like the game environment. Guys, he's a pocket passer. Sam Laporte has got the low ankle sprain. I don't know if he's playing. It's a run-heavy offense. We might see Jared Goff under pressure a little bit more, and we know that he's not often as good under pressure because Lions star center Frank Ragnow has a partially torn pec. And I just don't think he's a top 12 option. I'm like, hey, he'd be fine as a streamer, but having him as a top 12 option and basically being like, this is the guy we're rallying behind to be in our lineups this week. Everyone I mentioned earlier in the show, Richardson, Geno, Caleb, I'd start them over Goff. Running back. So we got a lot right last week. I don't want to pat myself on the back for everything right, but I will unpat myself back because I had concerns against Kyron Williams last week against the 49ers. I think the process was fine. I won't say it's the best process ever because it was wrong. So I don't want to be like, oh, Josh, perfect process, but I'll take that one right to the chin. But this week we're going to hopefully go 2 for 2 with the players we don't like. Oh, someone else in the chat, Dowdle or Pittman, half PPR, Dowdle. Wonderful. All right. J.K. Dobbins, the consensus running back 22 against the Chiefs. So, oh boy, it's bad this week. The Chargers are touchdown underdogs. That's bad game script. Their implied team totals just 16 points. Second worst of the entire slate. Justin Herbert high ankle sprain to the high ankle. Both star tackles, Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater, should miss this game with injuries. The Chiefs held Derrick Henry to 3.5 yards per carry week 1. Zack Moss to 2.8 yards per carry week 2. Bijan Robinson to 1.9 yards per carry in week 3. Dobbins came back to life in week 3 against the Steelers. I think he struggles week 4 against the Chiefs. And Bucky Irving. So consensus has him as the running back 29 against the Eagles. The Buccaneers are underdogs. Bucky Irving and Rachaad White are splitting carries. Irving might be pulling slightly ahead, but still the red zone work is 50-50. Rachaad White is the pass catching back. He ran more than 3 times as many routes last week when they trailed Denver. And Rachaad White's good at pass catching. Bucky Irving, I think he's a flex in the right game environment. This isn't the week. I just don't really know if this guy's like going to be ever the locked in goal line back when Rachaad White's healthy. Rachaad White's like 30 pounds heavier than Bucky Irving, folks. A couple more questions in the chat. We'll hit the receivers. Wow. I love this morning show. Start Andy Dalton over Goff then. I think I'd still go Goff, but I think it's close though. Like if you want to have fun, fantasy football's fun. We're allowed to start Andy Dalton in his revenge game. Carson Steele or Braylon Allen? Carson Steele. Braylon Allen is the backup. Jimbo in the chat tipping $2 this morning. Thank you. Covering some coffee. He says, I hope the back recovery is going well. Folks, quick update for anyone that cares. I have physical therapy next week. Final week of physical therapy. We're back. We're squatting. We're deadlifting. We're doing pull-ups. We're doing push-ups. It's all back. We're doing really well. We're 7.5 weeks post-surgery. And thank you everyone for the support. I've been very diligently recovering, rehabbing. Feels good. You know what doesn't feel good is I think we're going to sit Davante Adams. He's the consensus wide receiver 15 against the Browns. He's facing a strong defense. There's rumors this week about the Raiders switching starters and moving from Gardner Minshew to Aiden O'Connell. I mean, Aiden O'Connell played a lot last week. I think Adams should be ranked outside the top 24 when he's been targeted on just 22% of his routes this year. That's a fantasy wide receiver 3 type number. It's the same as Drake London. And he hasn't been nearly as involved as people hope. But at least Drake London's catching passes from Kirk Cousins, not Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. I'm also sitting Juwan Jennings. I talked about this last week with Rashid Shaheed when I was like, guys, it's Rashid Shaheed. We have to remember who we're dealing with, what the overall profile is. Sometimes people get excited. But Juwan Jennings, consensus wide receiver 30 against the Patriots. Oof. I mentioned earlier the 46.5 PPR points, 11 catches, 175 yards, 3 touchdowns last week. But George Kittle was already limited in practice on Wednesday this week. And we mostly just know who Juwan Jennings is at this point in his career. Yes, he had one insane game. I think he's 3rd in targets behind Brandon Aiyuk, behind George Kittle. It's a slightly lower pass volume offense, plus Jordan Mason carries. So really Jennings is like the Niners' 4th option in offense. He's a fringe flex play. He's not a locked-in fantasy wide receiver 3 type this week. Tight end. We nailed Mark Andrews as a sit last week. I think he's trending towards sit status again. Fantasy Pros has him as the tight end 7 right now against Buffalo. He ran 4 routes. He had 1 target. If you want more reason to be concerned about Andrews, Underdog Fantasy, his high-low receiving yards this week is 31.5. Oof. I think we can also just sit Isaiah Likely. Somehow he's the tight end 8 by consensus. Like, what's going on here? He ran 4 routes. He had 1 target. I'm still just not very interested in deciphering the Ravens tight end room. If both of them are allowed to run 4 routes apiece and get 1 target in a game where they score 28 points, I don't like that. I'm going to get to the Underdog pick 4. Last one in the chat. We've got pick 2. Steele, Mooney, Chase Brown, Javonte Williams. I think I'd go Steele, Mooney. I don't like that Javonte's in this now like 3-way timeshare with Jaleel McLaughlin and Tyler Beatty, however you say it. And then with Chase Brown, he's just getting so little work right now. So I think Carson Steele and Mooney, let's just bank on like production and them being on the field a lot and getting touches. Underdog pick 4, folks. And then we get out of here. I'm Josh Larky. This is the Dominator. I might have more picks for you later this week on Underdog, Prize Picks, whatever it might be, better picks. At JLarky Tweets on Twitter. Oh, someone's saying Tyler Bidet. I heard that too. It's spelled Badie. Some announcer out there was saying Tyler Bidet. I heard that as well. I think we're going to go with Batty. Someone's worried about Kareem Hunt being back. I think that affects Samaje Perine more. Carson Steele had 17 carries and he looked fine last week. All right. So I'm not a big fan of Jared Goff this week. I think the Lions run a lot more against the Seahawks. I'm taking Jahmyr Gibbs higher than 1/2 total touchdowns. Basically, I think he scores on Underdog. You get a spicy flame for the extra multiplier. And he's vulture protected. So if Montgomery scores on a drive where Gibbs touches the ball, Gibbs hits this mark. Gibbs has already scored in 2 of 3 games this year. The one game where he didn't score, he touched the ball 4 times on the drive. Montgomery scored. So he's 3 for 3 because he's vulture protected. The Lions have the 6th highest implied team total at 25 points. We like that one. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think he gets in the box. I think Saquon Barkley gets in the box higher than 0.5 total touchdowns. He scored in 2 of his 3 games this year. He has 5 total touchdowns. No A.J. Brown this week, most likely with the hamstring. No Devonta Smith this week with the concussion. Barkley will be the Eagles' offense. The implied team total is 23 points. So I think they score a decent amount of touchdowns here, just like Vegas thinks. And I think Saquon has one himself. Here we go. Travis Kelce. Swifties out there love this. They love this because we're taking Travis Kelce higher than 45.5 receiving yards. I know he has yet to reach 35 yards in any of his 3 games on the season. It's a regression play. Travis Kelce was visibly pissed on the sideline last game against the Falcons. Derwin James always matches up against Kelce for the Chargers. But Derwin James is suspended for week 4. It's really Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce in this passing game right now. Travis Kelce is their number 2 behind Rashee Rice. I think this is the week the Chiefs get Kelce going. Obviously, it looks horrible statistically, but the guy's number 2 on the team in targets. We know his track record. And again, like we have to remember, like there's emotions in football. Again, Kelce was pissed. This is often what happens. Like Christian Kirk looked visibly frustrated after 2 weeks of doing nothing, and then they just feed him targets. This is how the NFL works with the players that are respected in the locker room. He's 0 for 3. I think he goes 1 for 4. I think Kelce gets his big game week 4. You know who I don't have high hopes for? Let's complete the pick 4. Tyler Johnson, lower, 26.5 receiving yards. He's been lower in 2 of his 3 games this year. He really just had that one big 63-yard catch on primetime in week 1 on a broken play. That changed our perception of Tyler Johnson. Other than that, he had 16 yards in week 1, aside from that. Broken play. He had 20 yards in week 2. He had 20 yards in week 3. But injuries, Josh. Yeah. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua won't play. So week 2, he ran 90% as many routes as Demarcus Robinson. And he didn't produce 20 yards. Week 3, the Rams remembered he's Tyler Johnson, and he ran half as many routes as Demarcus Robinson last week. He only ran 14 routes. The Bears are the NFL's best defense. He's already 2-1 to the lower. I don't think we should overthink this. We're going to fade Tyler Johnson. Those 4 picks, the Gibbs and Saquon touchdowns, Travis Kelce higher, 45.5 receiving yards. Tyler Johnson lower, 26.5 receiving yards. I put $25 on this. You can win $267, 10.7x your money with Underdog Fantasy. Folks, I'm Josh Larky. This is the Dominator Week 4 Start State Show. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.